Chapter 881. Recover soul power. Inject soul power into her body. Recover. Inject. After a few cycles of this, Tang Wuling gradually began to sense that Gu Yue's aura had become stronger. This was a very good sign, and it showed that his injections of soul power were proving to be effective. The sky gradually dimmed as night fell. The sky slowly lit up, and the dawn of a new day arrived. During this time, Tang Wuling had already injected soul power into Gu Yue's body on 7 separate occasions, and the relentless cycle of cultivation and injection was making him very exhausted. After injecting soul power into her body for the 8th time, Gu Yue's condition had completely stabilized. However, she still hadn't woken up, so he could only enter a meditative state again despite his exhaustion. After attaining his soul power vortex, his rate of soul power recovery had sped up considerably compared to in the past, and 2 hours later, his soul power had recovered, and his exhaustion had also been significantly alleviated. However, as soon as he opened his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of a pair of large purple eyes situated extremely close to his own eyes, and he was given such a fright that his chi almost deviated. Thankfully, his soul power vortex reacted just in time and drew that wisp of soul power back to normal. You almost gave me a heart attack. You're awake. Tang Wuling had to take a few deep breaths to recover from the fright that he'd received, but his heart was quickly filled with elation. Gu Yue was sitting right in front of him and was wearing a set of his clothes. Her original dress was in complete tatters, so Tang Wuling had changed her into his clothes with his eyes closed. His clothes were clearly too big for Gu Yue, and she blinked as she sat on the ground. Her eyes were extremely clear, and they resembled a pair of clear ponds that reflected Tang Wuling's face. Gu Yue! Tang Wuling called out in a hesitant manner. A smile suddenly appeared on her face. She was extremely beautiful with nice appearance, and her smile had Tang Wuling feeling slightly entranced. Father. Thump. Tang Wuling had just sat up, and he collapsed straight to the ground again. He quickly sat bolt upright once again and stared at Gu Yue in a dumbstruck manner. What did you just call me? Gu Yue seemed to have been startled by the sudden fall that he took, and she reached out to tug on his sleeve while placing her other thumb into her mouth as she murmured, Father. Tang Wuling almost passed out as his eyes threatened to roll into the back of his head. What the hell was happening? Quit playing around. Gu Yue, you. Father. Gu Yue cried out again, but on this occasion, her voice was filled with indignation, and tears began to well up in her beautiful purple eyes. What? No matter how he looked at it, she didn't seem to be acting. Tang Wuling massaged his own brows as he said, Don't cry, let me think about this for a second. Gu Yue patted and tugged on his sleeve with both hands, and she swung his arm from side to side. Father, I'm hungry. Tang Wuling was initially filled with grief in the aftermath of Shrek Academy's destruction, but the fact that Gu Yue was referring to him as her father gave him such a huge shock that he temporarily forgot his sorrow. He forcibly calmed himself down as he hurriedly replied, All right, let me get some food out for you. As a massive foodie, his storage ring was never short of food. He produced some dried rations before handing them over to Gu Yue, who accepted the food and immediately began munching on it. However, her expression indicated that she was quite displeased. As she ate, she murmured to herself, This doesn't taste good. Tang Wuling could only heave a resigned sigh. How could dried rations possibly taste good? He gradually began to realize what may have happened as he looked at the diverse range of expressions that were appearing on Gu Yue's face. Could it be that she was suffering from amnesia? But even so, why was she referring to him as her father? Gu Yue, why are you calling me father? Tang Wuling asked. Gu Yue looked at him with a slightly befuddled expression. The first one I see is my father. Her voice was very childlike, and she couldn't even enunciate her words properly, but she spoke in a very serious manner. The first person she saw was her father. Wasn't that one of the laws of the animal kingdom? He originally had a bunch of questions for Gu Yue, but he couldn't bring himself to ask them now. After eating the dried rations, Gu Yue seemed to be full, but she was still not very pleased. Father, it doesn't taste good. I want to eat good food. All right, I'll try to find some good food for you. Tang Wuling said with a wry smile on his face. Gu Yue immediately held onto his arm in an excited manner before resting her head on his shoulder like a dependent little girl. Tang Wuling stood up, and only now did he get an opportunity to survey their surroundings. This was a lush forest that stretched as far as the eyes could see. There were no signs of agriculture or human activity here, and this seemed to be a primitive forest. The life force energy here was very rich, but he could detect a faint sense of danger here. Where was this place? If everything hadn't been a dream, then at the time, he and Gu Yue had both been caught in the explosion of that high-grade soul missile before they somehow ended up here. So be it, I'll adapt as the situation requires. This is a forest, so we should be able to make our way out of it eventually. With that in mind, Tang Wuling patted Gu Yue's hand before walking further into the forest with her hand in his. He held onto Gu Yue's hand with his left hand while holding his golden dragon spear in his right, using it like a machete to cut through the undergrowth. However, he quickly discovered that his golden dragon spear was completely superfluous here. Strangely enough, all of the plants in the surrounding area were extremely affectionate toward him. All of the plants in his way would part themselves to open up a path for him, so he was able to travel quite smoothly through the forest. What was going on here? His martial soul had transformed into Blue Silver Emperor following its second awakening, but the effects of that certainly weren't this pronounced. Could this be because of his 5th soul ring, that son of nature? With that in mind, Tang Wuling stopped and began to focus his attention on experiencing the aura of the natural setting around him. As expected, he could sense that all of the plants were striving to express their affection and intimacy toward him. If he were to cultivate here, he would definitely be able to progress very quickly. Unfortunately, cultivation was currently the last thing on his mind. All he wanted to do was get out of this forest as quickly as possible. After that, he would return to Shrek City to find his friends, then cure Gu Yue of her amnesia. In the aftermath of the horrendous tragedy that had just taken place, he was feeling utterly exhausted. With that in mind, he turned to glance at Gu Yue. With her by his side, he was feeling a lot better. If he'd been on his own, he would most likely only be feeling worse than this. At the sight of Tang Wuling turning to look at her, Gu Yue immediately gave him a sweet smile. Father. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Can you not call me that? I get goosebumps everywhere every time you call me father. It's. Gu Yue immediately pouted in a pitiable manner as tears welled up in her eyes. Does father not want me anymore? Tang Wuling could only heave a resigned sigh. Of course not. You can call me whatever you want. Father, carry me. Gu Yue spread open her arms toward Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling was rendered completely speechless, but Gu Yue had already jumped onto his body in an excited manner before clinging to him like an octopus. Her long silver hair swayed in the breeze as peals of tinkling laughter rang out. Tang Wuling could only support her by placing a hand on her backside, and she squirmed in his arms while he did his best to repress the scorching feeling that had welled up in his lower abdomen. Gu Yue encircled her arms around his neck before resting her head on his shoulder in an affectionate manner. A gentle look replaced the resigned expression in Tang Wuling's eyes, and he stroked Gu Yue's long hair as he allowed her to cling onto his body. He supported her with one hand while continuing onward through the forest. Gu Yue's body weight naturally didn't pose much additional burden to him. Chapter 882. However, what he didn't expect was that Gu Yue insisted on being carried by him from here onward. Whenever he tried to ask her to get down and walk, she would vehemently refuse, and in the end, he had no choice but to transfer her onto his back. Thus, Gu Yue clung onto his back with a wide smile on her face as they continued deeper into the forest. I must have owed you money in my past life. Tang Wuling couldn't help but chuckled in an amused manner as he looked at the pair of arms hanging down the front of his chest. Gu Yue ducked down and planted a kiss on his cheek as she said, Father, I like you. Tang Wuling faltered slightly, and just as he was about to say something, a sense of foreboding suddenly welled up in his heart as he reflexively sprang into the air. A brown figure whizzed past beneath his feet, and if he hadn't jumped into the air, he would have been struck by it for sure. Who's there? Tang Wuling yelled, but he couldn't see anything from the direction the sneak attack had come from. His eyes narrowed slightly as a cold aura began to emanate from his body. Blue silver emperor vines emerged from beneath his feet before spreading toward all directions. This was a forest, so it was a battlefield that was extremely suited to him. A strange turn of events then unfolded. Much to Tang Wuling's surprise, after his blue silver emperor vines plunged into the ground, he immediately felt his senses proliferate outward. His spirit of his realm spiritual power already had very powerful sensory abilities that could encompass an area with a radius of over 1,000 feet, but he could only approximately sense everything within that area. However, as his blue silver emperor vines fused together with this forest, he felt as if he'd attained an omniscient eye. Everything encompassed within his sensory range appeared in his mind in the form of a clear three-dimensional image. Around 600 meters up ahead and to his left, there was a massive figure with reddish brown fur springing from one tree to another like a shooting star. It was constantly moving moving at a high speed, and it seemed to be traveling around himself and Dou the entire time. Dou stuck her head out from behind Tang Wulin's shoulder and inspected her surroundings with a curious expression. Being able to see their opponent naturally made it a lot easier for them to devise a course of action. This was a Crimson Fire Monkey, but it was completely different from the Crimson Fire Monkey in Tang Wulin's mind. According to his understanding of soul beasts, Crimson Fire Monkeys were a type of low-grade soul beasts, most of which were less than 100 years old with only a small proportion of them managing to exceed that age. Even 100-year-old Crimson Fire Monkeys had very simple and predictable attacks. Aside from their slightly remarkable speed and their ability to traverse through the forest quickly, there wasn't anything noteworthy about them. However, this Crimson Fire Monkey was completely different. It was more than 10 times larger than the average Crimson Fire Monkey, making it around 7 meters tall. As it sped through the forest, there were traces of golden light emanating from its reddish-brown fur, and what was most surprising of all was that it had a third eye. This was a vertical golden eye that was shimmering with a strange light. The monkey was casting its gaze toward Tang Wulin's direction, and he could sense that even though there were many trees standing between them, that vertical eye seemed to be able to see him. Was this a mutated Crimson Fire Monkey? That was undoubtedly the case. Tang Wulin immediately began to make some deductions about where he was currently situated after witnessing the soul beast. Soul beasts were on the verge of extinction on the Douluo continent. Prior to this, the place that he'd come into contact with soul beasts most was in the spirit ascension plane of the spirit pagoda, which was able to emulate the Star Dou Forest. Could it be that Dou had taken him into the spirit ascension plane? That was certainly possible. After all, with her lofty status at the spirit pagoda, it wouldn't be difficult for her to take him into the spirit ascension plane. Just as these thoughts were running through his mind, the mutated Crimson Fire Monkey King was already hurtling rapidly toward them. It seemed to have sensed that Tang Wulin was inspecting it from afar, and it immediately sprang onto a massive tree. Its feet then stomped heavily onto the tree, propelling it through the air like a sharp red arrow. Tang Wulin's eyes narrowed slightly as a cold look appeared on his face. In the aftermath of the tragedy that had befallen Shrek Academy, his heart was filled with rage and depression. Now that an enemy had suddenly appeared, all of his pent-up negative emotions erupted at once. Dou, hold on tight. Tang Wulin instructed. Dou hurriedly tightened her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist. Tang Wulin's blood essence fluctuations abruptly erupted forth, and he spread open his arms to release his golden dragon claws. After forming the two vortexes in his body, Tang Wulin discovered that his martial soul and bloodline power could coexist at the same time. This meant that he didn't have to switch between them and could use both of their abilities at once. Countless blue-silver emperor vines erupted from the ground to stop the Crimson Fire Monkey King in its tracks. However, the Crimson Fire Monkey King was extremely aggressive. It spread open its arms, and crimson golden flames appeared all over its entire body as it crashed directly toward the blue-silver emperor barricade. Blue-silver emperor was a plant-type martial soul, after all, so the Monkey King was able to crash through the vines, and it reached Tang Wulin in an instant with an unstoppable aura emanating from its body. As opposed to directly swooping downward, a pair of wings suddenly appeared below the Crimson Fire Monkey King's armpits, causing it to suddenly pause in midair. It's using a strategy. Is this soul beast that intelligent? Spreading open those wings only resulted in a slight pause, but that was more than enough to throw off the trajectories of its opponent's attacks. At the same time, its third eye lit up, and immense spiritual power fluctuations surged forth toward Tang Wulin, instead of hurtling toward him from just the front. These fluctuations were converging toward him from all directions. Tang Wulin raised his head and let loose a furious roar. A massive golden dragon head encompassed his entire body, and he'd unleashed his golden dragon roar. The Crimson Fire Monkey King's body stiffened in midair, and the spiritual power fluctuations it had unleashed were immediately sent sweeping backward by the force of the golden dragon roar. However, right at this moment, a bolt of golden lightning suddenly erupted from its vertical golden eye. The bolt of lightning was imbued with scorching heat, and it pierced through the twisted space in the surrounding area almost instantaneously before reaching Tang Wulin. At the same time, it swooped down and lashed out at Tang Wulin with its sharp claws. Tang Wulin used his right golden dragon claw to shield himself from the oncoming bolt of golden lightning, and a scorching sensation immediately struck his palm. The immense force of the attack made even his powerful body sway slightly. The Crimson Fire Monkey King also took advantage of this opportunity to launch itself toward Tang Wulin with its sharp claws reaching toward him from both sides. Piss off! Tang Wulin roared as he unleashed his golden dragon shocks the heavens. A massive golden dragon erupted from beneath his feet to clash with the Crimson Fire Monkey King. A violent explosion rang out, felling many of the nearby trees, and the Crimson Fire Monkey King was sent flying while even Tang Wulin was forced to take a couple of steps backward before he could right himself. The Crimson Fire Monkey King landed on the branch of a massive tree in the distance, and a hesitant and bewildered look appeared in its eyes. It had clearly been a little intimidated by Tang Wulin's ferocious attack. Tang Wulin also curbed his own fury a little. This Crimson Fire Monkey King was unexpectedly very troublesome to deal with. Not only was it physically very powerful, it was also capable of unleashing spiritual attacks and also possessed powerful defensive prowess. Even after taking his golden dragon shocks the heavens head on, it was only blasted away, yet it remained completely unscathed. This indicated that it was certainly no ordinary soul beast. There was no doubt in Tang Wulin's mind that this was a 10,000-year-old soul beast, and it was also a mutated one as well. He took a deep breath to calm himself down. In the face of an opponent like this one, he couldn't allow his emotions to get the better of him. Tang Wulin appraised the Crimson Fire Monkey King intently through narrowed eyes, and his aura began to elevate. He didn't release his battle armor. That was a trump card that he wasn't going to use unless the situation absolutely demanded it. If this were the Spirit Ascension Plane, then this had to at least be the Intermediate Spirit Ascension Plane or even the Legendary Advanced Spirit Ascension Plane. Otherwise, there was no way that he'd come across such a powerful soul beast. As such, he had to conserve his power as much as possible in case he encountered even more powerful soul beasts later on. The Crimson Fire Monkey King's eyes swiveled from side to side in an indecisive manner, and as opposed to attacking Tang Wulin again, it suddenly darted away into the distance and fled the scene. Tang Wulin faltered slightly upon seeing this. It was undoubtedly the case that this Crimson Fire Monkey King was highly intelligent. After realizing that Tang Wulin was not the easy prey it had thought he was, it immediately chose to run away. Tang Wulin also heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that if he wanted to defeat the Crimson Fire Monkey King, he would have to fight with all his might. This was a mutated 10,000-year-old soul beast, and he had no allies with him, so it would be very difficult for him to defeat it. Father. The voice that rang out beside his ear immediately drained all of his battle intent away. His lips twitched as he patted Dou's leg. It's all right, you can get down now. All right, Dou climbed down from Tang Wulin's body in a reluctant manner, and a hint of lingering fear could be seen in her eyes as she asked, Father, what was that thing? It was so scary. Chapter 883. Tang Wulin appraised her in a rather speechless manner. In his mind, Dou's power had never been inferior to his, and in fact, she was most likely more powerful than him. However, she had transformed into a little girl who was completely dependent on him. It's all right, I'll protect you. Tang Wulin stroked her long hair, and she rested her head against his chest with a content expression on her face. You're the best, Father. Tang Wulin's hand immediately stiffened. How was he supposed to face her after she regained her memories? He heaved an internal sigh and regained his composure before beginning to assess their surroundings. The training he'd undergone on the demonic island had taught him how to remain calm regardless of what kind of situation he was in. Even if he were experiencing extremely strong emotions, he had to calm himself down as quickly as possible as he could only make the best judgments in a calm and tranquil state. It was undoubtedly the case that they were in a primitive forest. The more he looked at this place, the more he felt like it resembled the Star Dou Forest simulated in the Spirit Ascension Plane. The only difference was that the plants here appeared to be lusher and older than the plants he had seen in the Spirit Ascension Plane. If he really were in the Spirit Ascension Plane, then this definitely wasn't the Intermediate Spirit Ascension Plane. He'd been to the Intermediate Spirit Ascension Plane before, and the plants in there definitely weren't as lush as the plants here. Furthermore, it shouldn't have been that easy for him to encounter a soul beast that was not inferior to him in power in the Intermediate Spirit Ascension Plane. Thinking back to the power that the Crimson Fire Monkey King had just displayed, Tang Wulin concluded that he'd have to don his suit of battle armor if he wanted to defeat it. His soul power rank was only at 55 at the moment, but even the average 6-ring soul emperor would be no match for him. With the enhancements from his battle armor and golden dragon spear, Tang Wulin could be considered to be just as powerful as a high-grade soul master. As such, the Crimson Fire Monkey King had to at least be a 20,000-year-old soul beast. So was this the Advanced Spirit Ascension Plane? He knew nothing about that place, and he'd only heard Dou mention it briefly in the past. According to her, that place was the core resource of the spirit pagoda. However, he was able to make some standard judgments based on common sense. For example, the more powerful the soul beasts in a place were, the fewer soul beasts there would be in that place. This was because all powerful soul beasts had their own territory that they wouldn't allow others to encroach upon. It was quite clear that they were currently situated in the territory of the Crimson Fire Monkey King. Only after entering another territory would they potentially encounter other soul beasts. However, the main problem at the moment was, how were they supposed to get out of here? If this were the spirit ascension plane, then all of the people that entered it would be given special buttons that they could press to get themselves out of this place. Alternatively, they could die in this plane, and that would also bring them back to the real world, but they'd suffer some emotional trauma as a result. The issue was that neither of them had those special eject buttons that could get them out of here. Could he perhaps try to die in here instead? Tang Wuling didn't know if that would work, and there was no way to try this out. After all, what if he were to really end up dead? Furthermore, Tang Wuling had heard that the highest level of the spirit ascension plane was an actual world. If he and Dou were currently situated on that level, then dying here would truly mean death. Hence, he had to treat this situation with the utmost caution. After considering all of these possibilities, Tang Wuling wasn't in a hurry to advance onward. This was the territory of the Crimson Fire Monkey King, and at the very least, this was a soul beast that he could match in battle, so this place was relatively safe. Furthermore, his omniscient eye-like ability could constantly monitor their surroundings, thereby allowing him to detect any potential dangers very early on. As such, the best option for them now was to rest here for a while and ascertain which direction they should go in. If this really were the highest level of the spirit ascension plane, then this place was most likely the core region of the Star Dou Forest, which actually still existed in the real world. This was a place of extreme peril, and he could even run into 100,000-year-old soul beasts here. If he were to forge ahead in a rush hour, only to encounter a 100,000-year-old soul beast, then it was over for him and Dou. If this really were the core region of the Star Dou Forest, then as long as he could pick the right direction that would take them away from this area, they should be able to emerge from the forest eventually. Tang Wuling naturally wasn't able to ascertain which direction they should go in with his eyes alone. However, he could ask around using his blue silver emperor vines. Who was he going to ask? The plants here, of course. The plants in this area knew far more about this place than he did. With that in mind, Tang Wuling turned to Dou and said, Dou, I'm going to meditate for a while to find a way out of here. Make sure you don't stray far away from me. All right, Dou replied in an obedient manner. Tang Wuling was slightly dazed for a moment at the sight of this version of Dou. In his mind, Dou had always been an independent girl who seemed to constantly have something on her mind. There had always been a special sense of intimacy between them, and their relationship had been gradually nurtured in a subtle manner over the course of many years. This Dou didn't even seem like the Dou he once knew. However, there was also a part of him that wished that Dou would always remain this pure and innocent. At the very least, she'd be able to lead a happy life. Back when Dou had left him, he had been in a lot of pain, but as long as Dou truly loved him, her pain could only have been more unbearable than his. The only difference was that she knew how to find him, yet he had no idea how to find her. She had returned on this occasion, and he wasn't going to let her leave no matter what. Of course, he also had to ascertain that this really was Dou. After all, he wouldn't dare to get intimate with her unless he could eliminate the possibility that this was actually Naya. Tang Wuling sat down with his legs crossed and began to concentrate. His will was released outward along his blue silver emperor vines, and it slowly combined with the plants in the surrounding area, thereby facilitating communication. Prior to attaining intelligence, plants were the simplest of life forms. They were like spirit-refined metals. They possessed life, but not sentience. However, after they attained intelligence and became plant-type soul beasts, then there was a very good chance that they'd be more powerful than normal soul beasts. It was just that there were extremely few plants that ever became soul beasts. However, Tang Wuling had a way to work around this. He didn't need to contact intelligent plants. All he had to do was ask the plants which direction was dangerous and which direction was safe. He received an answer very quickly. The ordinary plants on the ground didn't give much reciprocation to his question, and it seems that they were completely incapable of processing his inquiry. However, the tall trees gave him a clear answer. From their perspectives, one direction was like a dark abyss while another direction was filled with bright sunlight. It was easy to ascertain which direction they should be heading toward. Tang Wuling was very elated by that discovery, and he opened his eyes before rising to his feet. However, his heart immediately jolted with shock as he discovered that Dou wasn't by his side. He hurriedly released his spiritual power and used his omniscient eye ability to search for her, and thankfully, she hadn't gone very far. She was only around 300 meters away from him, and she wore a wide smile on her face as traversed through the forest with her head lowered, seemingly looking for something. There was already a bouquet of wildflowers of different colors in her left hand, and she was looking very elated. However, her joyful display made Tang Wuling's heart throb with pain. As students of Shrek Academy, they didn't get to enjoy the pleasures that other people of their age experienced, and only in this state of memory loss could she truly enjoy herself. Right at this moment, two figures suddenly appeared at the same time under his omniscient eye. One of them rushed toward him while the other hurtled directly toward Dou. Both of them had appeared extremely abruptly, and they were traveling at astonishing speeds. Chapter 884. A surge of panic welled up in Tang Wuling's heart, and he immediately shot forth like a speeding arrow toward Dou's direction. Dou had lost all of her memories, and she was as vulnerable as a little girl. At this moment, all of the hairs on Tang Wuling's body had stood up on end, and he instantly reached his maximum speed. At the same time, a blue silver emperor vine was surging directly toward Dou at an even faster speed than him. The figure that was rushing toward Tang Wuling was none other than the Crimson Fire Monkey King, while the creature hurtling toward Dou was a green bird-type soul beast. It flew through the air like a speeding arrow, and just as Tang Wuling's blue silver emperor wrapped itself around Dou's waist, the green bird had reached her as well, and it was stabbing its sharp long beak directly toward her forehead. Demonic green bird. Tang Wuling instantly identified this soul beast, and it was exactly because he recognized it that the horror in his heart was exacerbated even further. Demonic green birds were one of the most vicious bird-type soul beasts in existence. Their growth was facilitated solely by ingesting the brains of other living beings, regardless of whether they were humans or soul beasts. However, they had a preference for human brains. These birds were some of the fastest creatures in the world of soul beasts, but there weren't all that many of them left in this world. In the distant past, demonic green birds had once caused a massive disaster. At the time, there were flock-dwelling soul beasts, and flocks of demonic green birds were like swarms of locusts, except they devoured brains rather than crops. Everywhere they passed through, all of the living beings in the area had holes on their heads, and their brains completely sucked away. Those were truly horrifying scenes to behold. After that, an extermination movement was carried out against the demonic green birds. Under the leadership of the soul beast kings, the demonic green birds were hunted to the brink of extinction, and only then did the threat they posed to the other living beings on the continent lessen significantly. Nowadays, they were very rarely seen, and whenever they appeared, they were extremely cautious. Humans didn't actually know much about the demonic green birds, and there were only records about these birds in some ancient tomes. This was because back when the demonic green birds were plaguing the continent, the soul beasts were still in power. It was said that at the time, a demonic green bird had eaten the brains of a true dragon and underwent constant evolution to become one of the most fearsome predators on the entire continent. It was exactly due to the fact that a true dragon had been killed that the rulers of the continent at the time, the Dragon Clan, united their power to hunt down these demonic green birds. It was a revenge mission launched with the intent of wiping out all demonic green birds from existence. At the sight of this demonic green bird, Tang Wuling felt as if his heart were about to stop beating. If that thing were to puncture Dou's head, there was no way that she could survive, and it was extraordinarily fast. Tang Wuling pulled his blue silver emperor vine back toward him with all his might while unleashing his golden dragon annihilation claws without any hesitation. The demonic green bird wasn't all that large. It only had a wingspan of just over half a meter, and its body was only around a foot in length. Its entire body was green in color, and its long beak was a transparent syringe needle. It was so fast that if one were to blink it in an opportune moment, they could completely lose sight of it. Tang Wuling had already reacted very quickly by unleashing his golden dragon annihilation claws and dragging Dou back toward him at the same time, but the demonic green bird was somehow able to accelerate for a second time in midair. As your flames erupted from its rear end, propelling its body through the air like lightning, it was able to reach Dou in an instant before its long beak tapped against her glabella. No. Tang Wuling let loose a heartbroken wail. In that instant, it was as if all of the blood in his body had been set alight. Yu Yue wore a completely dazed expression. Even as her body was being dragged back toward Tang Wuling, she still had no idea what was going on, and she could only look on as the demonic green bird's long beak approached her. Tang Wuling's agonized roar, the demonic green bird's frosty expression, and the oncoming crimson fire monkey king created a tragic snapshot in time. In that instant, it seemed that both Tang Wuling and Yu Yue's fates were sealed. Tang Wuling felt as if his heart were being torn apart. If Yu Yue were to perish to this demonic green bird, he'd never be able to forgive himself. He'd rather have his own brains eaten than for any harm to befall Yu Yue. Right at this moment, a strange turn of events unfolded. The surging bloodline power within Tang Wuling's body formed a layer of reddish golden light around him. This layer of light was absorbed in a frenzy by the silver dragon scale that Yu Yue had given him, and in that instant, time seemed to have stopped. Even with the demonic green bird's fearsome speed, it still paused momentarily in midair. In the next instant, both Yu Yue and Tang Wuling's bodies turned transparent. Piercing golden light erupted from Tang Wuling's body while dazzling silver light radiated from Yu Yue's body. The golden and silver lights intertwined, and the colorful gem on Tang Wuling's bracelet also lit up with scintillating light. In the next instant, the golden and silver lights abruptly converged and instantly fused as one. Dazzling rainbow light erupted forth, and both the crimson fire monkey king and demonic green bird regained the ability to move at the same time. The demonic green bird plunged beak first into the rainbow light like a green shooting star, only to be immediately repelled as a crisp clang rang out. Meanwhile, the crimson fire monkey king forcibly changed directions in midair and landed on a nearby tree before upraising the rainbow light up ahead in a bewildered manner. Not only was it extremely powerful, what was even more important was that it possessed intelligence far superior to that of most soul beasts. It was very good at weighing up its options, and it had sought out the demonic green bird as a helper, thinking that the two of them would be able to take down Tang Wuling and Yu Yue for sure. However, it didn't expect something like this to happen. At this moment, the bloodline energy vortex situated at Tang Wuling's chest was rotating at an unprecedented speed, and his own bloodline was undergoing a strange transformation. Enormous power gushed into his body like a river, and he felt as if he were expanding like a balloon. The terrifying energy flowing into his body made him throw his head back and let loose an involuntary dragon's roar into the sky. This was the divine dragon transformation. He could clearly sense that he and Yu Yue were completing the divine dragon transformation, and this wasn't the first time they'd done this. However, on the previous occasions this had happened, Yu Yue had always been the one leading the transformation, and all he could do was use the power of this transformation in battle. However, things were different this time. He seemed to be the one who had triggered the divine dragon transformation, and the tremendous energy resulting from it was too much even of his immensely powerful body to handle. The energy surging toward him from Yu Yue's body was blowing him up like a balloon, and his meridians were about to give out. On top of that, this seemed to only be the beginning. Ugh. The dragon's roar had already changed into a howl of agony. Never had Tang Wuling felt so close to death before, even when he was breaking his golden dragon king seals. Never would he have thought that something like this would happen. However, in the instant that his agonized howl rang out, Tang Wuling could clearly sense that the energy flowing into his body abruptly ceased, and his consciousness also returned to normal. Rainbow scales covered his entire body, and he had risen to over 5 meters tall. This transformation was slightly different compared to the divine dragon transformations he'd undergone with Yu Yue in the past, and it seemed that their soul fusion skill had undergone an evolution. Tang Wuling could clearly recall Yu Yue telling him that the divine dragon transformation was only the first transformation. Divine dragon awakens. Could it be that they had reached the second transformation now? A pair of massive rainbow dragon wings spread open on his back, and he could sense energy particles of all elements in the forest surging toward him in a frenzy. Not only did they flow into his body, they also formed a vast expanse of energy clouds around him that could be used by him at any time. Along with the unprecedented power that he'd attained, something extra also appeared in his mind. It seemed that the power that belonged to Yu Yue could also be used by him now. Chapter 885. After witnessing Tang Wuling's transformation and hearing his dragon's roar, the crimson fire monkey king was already fleeing the scene. It transformed into a reddish golden streak of light and appeared over a kilometer away in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the demonic green bird was escaping at an even faster speed. After almost suffering complete genocide, the few demonic green birds that remained had become a lot more adept at protecting themselves. As such, it immediately began to flee after sensing how powerful its enemy's aura had become. However, Tang Wuling wasn't going to let them get away. He hated these two soul beasts with a vengeance. They had almost just taken the life of the woman he loved the most. He waved his right hand toward the demonic green bird, and the air abruptly congealed as immense energy surged violently. The demonic green bird's lightning fast speed was immediately significantly hampered, and it was as if it were flying through treacle. It was still struggling to forge ahead, but it had slowed down drastically. Tang Wuling flapped his rainbow dragon wings, and in the next instant, he appeared right in front of the demonic green bird before lashing out with his rainbow dragon claws. The demonic green bird reacted extremely quickly as a bright ring of green light erupted from its body. The rainbow dragon claws struck the ring of light amid a resounding boom, and the latter was destroyed, but Tang Wuling's claws were also repelled. One had to realize that after undergoing this divine dragon transformation, Tang Wuling's current cultivation rank had been elevated by 3 major levels at the very least, which meant that he was currently comparable in power to a soul Douluo. Furthermore, his bloodline power was countless times more immense than when he only had his golden dragon king bloodline. As such, it was very extraordinary that the demonic green bird had been able to withstand one of his attacks. However, in the next instant, a rainbow vortex suddenly appeared on the palm of Tang Wuling's rainbow dragon claws. In the instant that the rainbow vortex appeared, the green light emanating from the demonic green bird's body dimmed significantly, and it let loose an alarmed cry as it was drawn directly toward Tang Wuling's dragon claws. Elemental stripping. This was undoubtedly one of Yu Yue's abilities. This demonic green bird was a wind attribute soul beast, and only through the propulsion force of wind did it manage to reach such high speeds. Generally speaking, all fast soul beasts possessed either spatial attribute powers or wind attribute powers. Spatial attribute soul beasts were more proficient in displaying explosive spikes and speed, and were generally more unpredictable. Wind attribute soul beasts were lacking in those areas in comparison, but they were more agile and had greater stamina. However, in the face of elemental stripping, it didn't matter what attribute soul beast this bird was. Not only were the elements in the space surrounding the demonic green bird completely stripped away, in his divine dragon transformation state, Tang Wuling was even able to directly strip the bird of the elemental energy within its body. Without the enhancements of the wind elements, the demonic green bird's speed suffered drastically. It was about to land in Tang Wuling's palm at any moment now, yet all of a sudden, it turned around, and its eyes turned into a crimson color. In the next instant, its green body abruptly took on a fiery red hue. Was this a wind and fire dual attribute soul beast? The fiery red color only appeared for an instant before reverting back to green, and everything had happened in the blink of an eye, but Tang Wuling could clearly sense that his elemental stripping no longer affected it. The demonic green bird had made use of the wind and fire vortex within its body to resist his elemental stripping ability. This would only work for a very short time, but it gave the demonic green bird a chance to survive. It flapped its wings with all its might, and its speed abruptly increased drastically. Its long beak became as thin as a sword, and it abruptly shot forward. In the instant that it underwent this acceleration, a sonic boom rang out, indicating that it had broken the sound barrier, and it was truly fleeing as quickly as it could. This was the fastest soul beast that Tang Wuling had ever seen, but he wasn't going to let it escape no matter what. With such a powerful and fast enemy constantly lurking nearby, Yu Yue would be in perpetual danger. What if she were to stray further away from him next time? If he allowed the demonic green bird to escape, only for it to return and kill Yu Yue when he least expected, he wouldn't be able to live with himself. As such, in the instant that the demonic green bird accelerated once again, Tang Wuling's left hand had already slammed into the air. Space instantly shattered, and the surrounding plants fell completely still as a black hole abruptly appeared out of thin air. With the enhancements he received from the divine dragon transformation, Tang Wuling now had exemplary control over his own power. He had created a black hole with a diameter of 1 meter that was just large enough to encompass the demonic green bird's entire body. Even though it had just broken the sound barrier, it still faltered for an instant in midair in the face of the black hole's terrifying suction force. The split-second delay was all it took for Tang Wuling to lash out with his dusk gold dread claws. The claws were shimmering with rainbow light, and its effective range had been increased to a terrifying 50 meters. 5 50-meter long rainbow claws projections fell from the sky, slamming the bird directly into the ground. Boom! The demonic green bird crashed to the ground, and a plume of green feathers flew in all directions. However, much to Tang Wulin's surprise, this bird had extremely powerful defensive prowess, even though its forte clearly lay in its speed. Even after taking an all-out attack from his dusk-gold dreadclaws in his divine dragon transformation state, it still wasn't killed. It was only knocked unconscious, and an extremely deep wound through which bone was visible had been inflicted on its body. But that wasn't a lethal injury. Tang Wulin didn't have time to finish the demonic green bird off, so he waved his right hand through the air and drew it into his grasp. At the same time, his body swayed, and golden light flashed, following which he immediately appeared around a kilometer away. After just a few more flashes, a crimson figure appeared in his field of view. Get down here. He let loose a cold roar as his left hand shot for like lightning, sending a streak of golden light hurtling through the air. The crimson fire monkey king screeched and attempted to evade, but right at this moment, its entire body was suddenly compressed by boundless energy from all directions. Everything around it had turned into a golden color, and it could only look on as the streak of golden light punctured its body with unerring accuracy. Powerful life force energy surged into Tang Wulin's body in a frenzy. The immense bloodline energy being funneled through the golden dragon spear was quickly replenishing the energy that he'd expended. He descended from the sky and spread open his rainbow dragon wings before landing on the ground. In just the span of a few breaths, the crimson fire monkey king was reduced to nothing more than skin and bones by the golden dragon spear. The spear was still golden in color, but there was a layer of rainbow light shimmering around it, and it was clearly able to devour life force energy at a faster rate than it had been able to in the past. Just as Tang Wulin had expected, following the death of the crimson fire monkey king, it didn't contribute to increasing the age of his soul rings. Instead, an inky black soul ring took shape above its body. This was a 10,000-year soul ring, so this was a real soul beast. Tang Wulin took a deep breath, and he was just about to do something when he felt the energy in his body quickly seeping away. Immediately thereafter, a figure detached itself from his body, and he hurriedly encircled his left arm around her slender waist. It was none other than Dou Yue. Her face was rather pale, and she seemed to have received quite a fright. She was blinking her large purple eyes, and it seemed that she was on the verge of tears. Waves of feebleness washed over Tang Wulin, yet much to his surprise, they weren't as intense as the feebleness he's been afflicted by when they'd undergone their divine dragon transformation in the past. Perhaps this was due to the fact that he'd absorbed the crimson fire monkey king's life force energy. In any case, he could still retain his consciousness, and he had at least 30% of his power left. This was a very good thing as he was still holding a demonic green bird that he was yet to take care of. If he were to fall unconscious only for the demonic green bird to wake up before him, then they would be in very big trouble. Tang Wulin unwound his arm from around Dou Yue's waist before preparing to finish off the demonic green bird. Father, don't. Dou Yue let loose a loud cry, and Tang Wulin's golden dragon claws faltered right above the demonic green bird's head. What is it? All of the shock and horror in Tang Wulin's eyes had vanished, and there was only elation shimmering in his eyes as he appraised Dou Yue. Back when Dou Yue had appeared at Shrek Academy to save him from that soul missile, Tang Wulin was already almost certain that she teleported herself to his side using that silver dragon scale that she'd given him. As such, he was 70% sure that this woman was indeed Dou Yue, despite her resemblance to Naya. However, he was basically 100% sure that this was Dou Yue now. If not, how had he managed to unleash that divine dragon transformation? What could be more indicative of her identity than their soul fusion skill? Dou Yue strode toward him before taking the demonic green bird from him and holding it in her arms. It's so cute. Please don't hurt it. Tang Wulin stumbled slightly upon hearing this. Cute. This thing had almost just eaten her brains, yet she was calling it cute. However, only now did Tang Wulin get a chance to inspect the demonic green bird's appearance, and he had to admit that cute wasn't exactly an inaccurate adjective to apply to it. Its body was only around a foot in length, and its green feathers were like jade. Its long beak was green with faint traces of gold, and it was very translucent. Its body was sleek and slender, and unsurprisingly, it was extremely streamlined. It was indeed a very good-looking bird. It currently had its eyes closed, and its eyelids were also of a faint golden color. There was also a golden pattern running all the way from the tip of its head to the end of its tail. Chapter 886. Tang Wulin could still recall that it had a pair of ruby-like eyes, and if it were to stand still without moving, it would be like a perfect jade statue. But this thing was lethal. No, it's too dangerous. These demonic green bird evolved through eating brains. Do you understand? Tang Wulin said in an urgent manner. I'm not giving it to you. Dou Yue hugged the demonic green bird tightly to her chest and turned around so that her back was facing him. Tang Wulin immediately rushed around to face her with a serious expression. Listen to me, Dou Yue. This thing is not some fun toy or pet. It almost killed you just now. No. Father is so cruel. Dou Yue turned away from him again. Tang Wulin was completely speechless. I'm the cruel one. If I'm not cruel here, it's going to kill us. Be a good girl and listen to me. Dou Yue, this demonic green bird is a lethal predator, and it once brought disaster to the entire continent in ancient times. This demonic green bird is different from the ones that are described in written records. This one is even more powerful than the records claim. I've only knocked it out, but after it wakes up, it's going to pose a major threat to us. We can't even use our divine dragon transformation now, so after it wakes up, it's going to kill us both. Do you want to see me die? Dou Yue looked up to find Tang Wulin extending his hands toward her with a serious look on his face. She blinked, and suddenly said, I have a way to make it not hurt us. Before Tang Wulin had a chance to say anything else, she suddenly raised her hand and swept it through the air. A series of strange lines immediately appeared in midair, and all of them appeared to be living beings that were shimmering with silver light. These lines gradually formed a silver rune that slowly descended toward the demonic green bird's head. As the rune surged into his body, the demonic green bird began to tremble, and Dou Yue gently stroked its green feathers as she crooned. It's all right, little green. It'll be over soon. Tang Wulin looked on with a surprised expression. He could clearly sense that the silver rune was imbued with an extremely enormous amount of spiritual power. Even with his spirit abyss realm spiritual power, he was unable to fathom just how much spiritual power that rune contained. He hurriedly asked, have you remembered something? Dou Yue? Dou Yue shook her head. No. Something in my mind told me that doing this to little green would stop it from attacking us. It's going to be a good little green now. Tang Wulin was still rather concerned. What if that doesn't work? It'll work. Dou Yue insisted in a serious and confident manner. Tang Wulin suggested, how about this? I promise you that I won't kill it, but you have to let me tie it up with my blue silver emperor vines, and we'll see how it reacts when it wakes up again. Dou Yue was clearly rather reluctant, but she still nodded in the end at the sight of Tang Wulin's serious expression, and she carefully handed the demonic green bird over to him. Tang Wulin didn't dare to use normal blue silver emperor vines. He released Goldsong right away, and the latter immediately wrapped itself around the demonic green bird's body. Dou Yue was very intrigued by the sight of Goldsong. Come to think of it, Goldsong had changed in appearance once again. After Tang Wulin broke his ninth golden dragon king seal and separated his bloodline and soul powers, a single horn had grown on Goldsong's forehead. At the same time, its body had elongated to 18 meters in length. It appeared to be very slim and thin, but as opposed to the scale-like patterns it had in the past, it had golden dragon scales just like Tang Wulin's all over its body, giving it the appearance of a small golden dragon. Its eyes were like a pair of golden crystals, and it clearly had a more powerful aura than before. Tang Wulin could also sense a high level of intelligence from within Goldsong's body. This little guy was once just a defective soul spirit, but it was growing up at a rapid rate. Tang Wulin had a feeling that if Goldsong could grow dragon wings someday, then it would truly become an existence that was similar to a true dragon. His tyrant dragon soul spirit also evolved along with his bloodline, but it was evolving to a far lesser extent than Goldsong. This was partially because it was very powerful already, but more importantly, it was still a land dragon at its core rather than a true dragon. Goldsong was different as it was Tang Wulin's first soul spirit. It had been with him ever since he awakened his bloodline, so its bloodline was completely equivalent to his bloodline. As such, it was more heavily impacted by Tang Wulin's growth. Of course, if the tyrant dragon could grow dragon wings someday, it would be in the same situation as Goldsong, but they would still have different capabilities. To a soul master, the most important function of a soul spirit was its ability to provide soul rings. For normal soul masters, their soul spirits couldn't do much, and for more powerful soul masters, their suits of battle armor served a far greater purpose than their soul spirits, so they spent most of their time and energy developing their battle armor. Only the soul spirits that provided one with their final few soul rings were sufficiently powerful to be considered as strong allies in battle. This was why Shrek's 7 monsters very rarely released their soul spirits in battle. Their soul spirits had only provided them with their first few soul rings, and they had undergone evolution by absorbing energy from the spirit ascension plane, but they still weren't powerful enough to be very effective in battles. Only Tang Wulin's Goldsong was an exception to this as its evolution wasn't connected to the evolution of his soul rings. Instead, it evolved alongside Tang Wulin's bloodline. He had already broken 9 golden dragon king seals, so the current Goldsong was extremely different from what it had once been. Tang Wulin placed a hand hand on Goldzong's head, and it licked his palm with its forked tongue. There was a hint of pride in its eyes, and it seemed to be telling Tang Wuling through its expression that it had already become very powerful. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. All right, then I'll bring you out in my next battle and you can show me your powers then. Goldzong nodded in a very humanized response before turning toward the demonic green bird with an unfriendly expression, as if it were contemplating whether it should kill this bird. Gu Yue glared at Goldzong and warned, don't even think about it. Goldzong turned to look at her with a rather dazed look in its eyes, and it then bowed its head as if in agreement and submission. Only then did a pleased smile appear on Gu Yue's face. The demonic green bird had sustained rather severe injuries, so it wasn't going to be waking up anytime soon. On this occasion, Tang Wuling issued a very stern instruction to Gu Yue, telling her that she couldn't stray further than 10 meters away from him before he sat down with his legs crossed to resume his meditation. His consciousness seeped into his own body as he inspected his two energy vortexes. His blood essence vortex had clearly shrunk significantly, and it was also rotating at an extremely slow rate. It was undoubtedly the case that he'd expended a vast amount of bloodline energy after undergoing the divine dragon transformation. His soul power vortex was also in a similar state, but much to his surprise, his meridians seemed to have been widened slightly in the aftermath of the divine dragon transformation state he'd just adopted. His meridians were quite resolute, so they weren't damaged during this process. Was he finally gradually becoming more able to handle the power of the divine dragon transformation now that he'd become more powerful himself? As he meditated, he recalled back to the feeling of when the divine dragon transformation had been triggered. At the time, his heart was filled with nothing but fear. All he had on his mind was Gu Yue. He had wished with all his heart that he could die in her place, and after that, he managed to actively initiate the divine dragon transformation for the first time. The power flowing toward him from Gu Yue's body was far too immense, and his body was on the verge of bursting at the seams. However, right after he let loose that roar of pain, the injection of energy suddenly ceased. That was most likely due to an unconscious reaction from Gu Yue to cut off her flow of energy to him. If Gu Yue hadn't suffered from memory loss, perhaps they'd be able to better control the divine dragon transformation together and use this soul fusion skill to perfection. That feeling of power had been absolutely glorious. Even more importantly, only after experiencing that level of power could he gain a better understanding of it, and that would help him avoid a lot of mistakes in his future progression. On this occasion, he meditated for a long time, both to replenish the energy he'd expended, as well as to consolidate the observations he'd made. Chapter 887. When Tang Wuling awakened from his meditation, he discovered Gu Yue sleeping soundly while using his leg as a pillow. A warm look appeared in Tang Wuling's eyes at the side of her sleeping face, and he gently stroked her long hair. Why do you look like Naya now, Gu Yue? There's no sign on your body to suggest that you've used any disguise techniques. What happened to you? They were currently most likely situated deep within the Star Dou Forest, and there was no way for him to treat her amnesia here. Only after leaving this place could he seek to remedy her condition. At this point, he could only take things one step at a time. The fall of Shrek City would have undoubtedly had an extremely severe impact on the entire continent, and even after he made it out of this forest, he would be under immense pressure as the leader of Shrek's 7 monsters. He could clearly recall that prior to rising up into the air, Atlas Douluo Yangming had told him that he was the future hope of Shrek Academy. Shrek Academy had given him everything, and without the Academy, he wouldn't be who he was today. As such, it was undoubtedly his duty to rebuild and avenge Shrek Academy. He reflexively clenched his fists and forced himself not to think of all of those familiar faces from Shrek Academy. There was no point in wallowing in grief. He had to be strong. He didn't know what condition his friends were currently in, but they were most likely fine seeing as Gu Yue had shielded him and his friends from most of the power of that soul missile's explosion. With that in mind, Tang Wuling pulled his soul communicator out of his storage cell tool, but just as he expected, there was no signal here, so he couldn't make any calls. He heaved a faint sigh and pulled out some dried rations to eat while Gu Yue continued to sleep on his leg. In the distance, the black soul ring that had risen up from the crimson fire monkey king's body had already disappeared as too much time had elapsed. This was undoubtedly a waste of a soul ring, but there was no way around it as neither he nor Gu Yue required a soul ring at the moment. In reality, if it weren't for the fact that the crimson fire monkey king had attacked them twice, he really didn't want to kill it. There were barely any soul beasts left on the continent, and soul beasts as powerful as this one were even rarer. Right at this moment, the thought of the demonic green bird suddenly sprang into his mind, and he immediately cast his gaze toward it. Goldzong was still wounded tightly around the demonic green bird's body, and strangely enough, the wound on its body had already healed and been covered by a layer of feathers. It had already woken up at this point, and it was appraising Tang Wuling with its pair of ruby-like eyes. Despite the fact that Goldzong was wrapped around its body, it wasn't struggling at all. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly as he scrutinized the demonic green bird. In his opinion, it was best to kill this thing right away. Just its reputation alone was more than enough reason for him to put an end to its life. The demonic green bird seemed to have sensed his malicious intent, and it reflexively recoiled. It glanced at Gu Yue, who was still sleeping on his leg, and it let loose a string of loud chirps. Gu Yue shuddered, and her long eyelashes fluttered as she opened her bleary eyes. What is it, little green? I was having a really good nap. Why did you call me? Chirp, chirp, chirp. Gu Yue sat up and turned to Tang Wuling as she pouted, and said, Father, little green says you were being mean to it. Were you scaring it again? Tang Wuling faltered upon hearing this. You can understand what it's saying. Gu Yue nodded in response. Yes. I'm Little Green's master, so of course I can understand it. A skeptical look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Are you sure? Gu Yue nodded again. Of course. Look at this, Little Green, am I beautiful? The demonic green bird hurriedly nodded. Tang Wuling immediately burst into laughter. What about me? Am I handsome? The demonic green bird gave him a vicious glare before turning its head away, and Tang Wuling was quite flabbergasted by just how humanized it was. Ha ha ha. Gu Yue clapped her hands with elated laughter as she said, Father, you can release it now. I promise that little green won't hurt me. Tang Wuling's eyes narrowed slightly, and even though he was still rather concerned, he decided that it wouldn't be too much of a risk to release the demonic green bird seeing as he was right by Gu Yue's side. Release it, Goldzong. Goldzong did as it was told, and a streak of green light instantly flew upward as the demonic green bird rose up into the air. Tang Wuling reflexively tried to grab it, but Gu Yue immediately stopped him. The demonic green bird circled around in the air before spreading its wings and slowly descending. It intentionally slowed down during its descent before landing on Gu Yue's shoulder and rubbing its head against hers in an extremely affectionate manner. Had it truly been tamed? This was the first time that Tang Wuling had heard of a soul beast being tamed, especially when the soul beast in question was at least 10,000 years old like this one was. If it were truly willing to serve Gu Yue, then it would actually be quite a useful ally. The demonic green bird seemed to be very obedient and had lost all of its vicious nature. It was standing quietly on Gu Yue's shoulder and rubbing its head against her hair from time to time. Only then did Tang Wuling heave a sigh of relief. Goldzong returned to his side, and golden light flashed as it vanished into his body. You'll be called Little Green from now on. Gu Yue giggled as she stroked the demonic green bird. Tang Wuling said in a mocking voice, Look at its green body and red eyes. It looks like a vegetable and tomato salad. Why don't you call it salad instead? Chirp chirp. The demonic green bird immediately gave an enraged response. Gu Yue pouted and said, Little Green doesn't like that name. I think Little Green is better. Tang Wuling aimed a cold glare at the demonic green bird. You better not try anything. Otherwise, humph. The demonic green bird raised its head like a proud swan in response and refused to look at him. It didn't feel any affection toward this man who had just hurt it not long ago. Let's go. Tang Wuling released his blue silver emperor vines to communicate with the surrounding plants, and he continued onward while inspecting their surroundings along the way. He stopped after a short while, and said to Gu Yue, Ask it which way we should go to leave this forest. Even though he was receiving guidance from the plants, a soul beast, especially a highly intelligent one like this demonic green bird, clearly knew far more about this forest than all of the surrounding plants. Gu Yue turned to the demonic green bird, and there seemed to be light flashing through her eyes, to which the bird gave a few chirps in response. Gu Yue nodded, and said, You've decided on the correct direction, Father. However, Little Green says that there are even more fearsome beings outside the forest, but it seems to be referring to us humans. Tang Wuling's eyes narrowed slightly upon hearing this. All of the signs and evidence suggested that this place was indeed the place that he thought it was. If that were true, then it would be very normal for the soul beasts here to be fearful toward humans. After all, humans were constantly invading their habitat. habitats. According to his knowledge, the entire core region of the Star Dou Forest was heavily guarded by soldiers in case the powerful soul beasts in the area decided to riot. These soldiers weren't deployed here by the Federation. Instead, they were from the Spirit Pagoda. On this continent, the main strength of Shrek Academy was its influence through its countless alumni that had taken on important roles in various important organizations. In contrast, the main strength of the Tang sect lay in its wealth of resources and business connections, while the main strength of the Spirit Pagoda came from the control it exerted over the world of soul masters through its soul spirits and spirit ascension planes. The Spirit Pagoda headquarters was situated outside of Shrek Academy, but it wasn't far away from Shrek Academy. It was also quite close to the Star Dou Forest, and the core region of the forest had always been firmly under its control. No one knew what it was like in there, and an extremely heavy price had to be issued to the Spirit Pagoda if one wanted to be granted entry. It could be said that the Spirit Pagoda was essentially raising these powerful soul beasts in an enclosure. He didn't know how he and Gu Yue had ended up here, but if they wanted to get out of this place, not only did they have to avoid the powerful soul beasts in here, they also had to bypass the barricade set up by the Spirit Pagoda. With that in mind, Tang Wuling couldn't help but cast his gaze toward Gu Yue. She was the one who had taken him here, and she currently held quite a lofty status in the Spirit Pagoda, but her memories had been completely wiped clean, and she was like a blank canvas. It seemed that he had no choice but to get her and himself out of here using the infiltration methods he'd learned on the demonic island. As they traversed through the forest, Gu Yue continued to communicate with the demonic green bird, and it gave him a lot of information. It revealed to Gu Yue that there were very few soul beasts left in the forest, so there were virtually no territorial conflicts as everyone had their own territories. As such, the chances of encountering soul beasts here weren't very high. It and that Crimson Fire Monkey King were acquaintances, and neither of them could defeat the other, so there had also been a truce between them. The Crimson Fire Monkey King had told it that humans had entered its territory, and the two of them had tried to hunt down Tang Wuling and Gu Yue as prey. The demonic green bird seemed to have reached the cultivation bottleneck and could only evolve through consuming the brains of a powerful being. It was just that all of the remaining soul beasts in the Star Dou Forest were very powerful, so it was difficult to hunt any of them down. Furthermore, the soul beast kings that controlled the forest strictly prohibited slaughter between the soul beasts here, and it didn't dare to challenge their authority. What are soul beast kings? Tang Wuling asked in a curious manner. The demonic green bird faltered slightly before shaking its head, and its entire body began to tremble with fear. Chapter 888. Gu Yue was also quite curious. Don't be scared, little green. Tell us who the soul beast kings are. The demonic green bird looked up at her and blinked its ruby eyes, but on this occasion, it lowered its head and refused to say anything. Right at this moment, Tang Wuling suddenly felt a burst of invisible pressure surge toward him from all sides. His spiritual power, which was spreading through the area with the assistance of the surrounding plants, was instantly forced back into his body. Tang Wuling was very alarmed by this development, and he hurriedly rushed over to Gu Yue before latching onto her hand. The demonic green bird raised its head, and a hint of horror appeared in its eyes as the sky suddenly darkened. The bright sunlight had vanished without a trace and was replaced by a vast expanse of darkness. Enormous pressure descended from the heavens, striking one with an indescribable sense of fear. What was even more unsettling to Tang Wuling was that all of the natural energies and energy particles in the air were quickly vanishing. To put it more accurately, they were fleeing the scene, and only darkness elements remained. A low roar sent tremors running through the entire forest. Who dares to kill soul beasts here? Who has invaded the Star Dou Forest? A voice echoed throughout the entire forest, and even though Tang Wuling was trying to communicate with the surrounding plants with all his mind, all of them had instinctively fallen silent. Tang Wuling's heart had also completely sunk. Such a terrifying aura could only be coming from a soul beast that was over 100,000 years old. They were facing an unfathomably powerful enemy, and this was definitely the most powerful soul beast he'd ever encountered. The only one that could compare to it was the colossal octopus he'd encountered in the sea when traveling toward the Douluo Empire. The sky turned completely inky black in color with faint purple light flashing up above. The dense darkness elements in the surrounding area sent strange fluctuations surging through the air, and it was as if there were countless shrill howls of anguish erupting in all directions. The forest had been filled with life force energy just a moment ago, but all of a sudden, it was now resembling a ghostly realm. Everything around them became deathly silent, and not even any insects or birds could be heard. Tang Wuling was struck by a sense of asphyxiation, and both his soul power and blood essence power had virtually congealed in his body. He had always been aware of the fact that his current powers were completely insignificant in the face of truly powerful beings, but he didn't want to resign himself to his fate. He wasn't afraid of death, but he definitely didn't want to die. There were too many things that he still had to do. He had to resurrect Shrek Academy. However, what could he do in the face of such a powerful enemy? Even if he were to unleash the divine dragon transformation again, he most likely still wouldn't be a match for this almighty being. Furthermore, they had just unleashed the divine dragon transformation not long, so there was no way they could use it again. He turned to look at Gu Yue, and she also seemed to be very scared. Her face was quite pale as she hid behind him and gripped tightly onto his arm. Tang Wuling's heart sank even further. Were they going to die here in this forest together? No. He couldn't allow this to happen. He had to protect her even if it meant he had to shed every single drop of blood within his body. With that in mind, Tang Wuling's aura suddenly began to elevate. His unyielding will set his bloodline alight, and his congealed bloodline aura began to rise up once again. Even his soul power had been infused with renewed vitality, and a layer of golden light began to emanate from his body. I won't let anyone hurt you before I die. Tang Wuling took a deep breath as he quickly donned his suit of one-word battle armor. He swept his right hand over his forehead, and his golden dragon spear appeared in his grasp. His aura also began to elevate in a frenzy alongside his bloodline power. A confused voice rang out in the distance. Right at this moment, Tang Wuling felt as if an extra path had opened up in the forest. The path was dark purple in color, and it was only barely visible. At the conclusion of the path, a figure slowly emerged from within the darkness. She had blackish purple scales that covered her entire body like a suit of armor, and she was quite tall and slender with a voluptuous chest, as well as a pair of long legs. Above her chest were a pair of fair and delicate shoulders, and a deep cleavage. She had a head of long purple hair that fluttered beside her despite the absence of any apparent breeze, and her facial features were extremely beautiful and seductive. Her eyes were of a deep purple color, yet her lips had a glossy purple hue. On her forehead was an inky black scale that was radiating layers of purple light, which was surging over the top of her head in a natural manner. Tang Wuling couldn't help but draw a sharp breath at the sight of her. He had thought that he was perhaps dealing with a 100,000-year-old soul beast initially, but he was now certain that the being he was currently facing was over 200,000 years old. This was most definitely one of the beings that stood at the pinnacle of the world of soul beasts. This was a great beast. He had learned a lot about great beasts during his time at Shrek Academy, and he was very interested in them at the time, so he'd done some research of his own as well. After cultivating to 100,000 years old, that was basically the limit of a soul beast. If they wanted to continue to progress, then there were two options open to them, one of which was to be reborn as a human and cast aside their beastly forms. In doing so, they would gain access to the higher levels of intelligence and learning abilities available to humans, thereby granting them a chance to strive toward becoming a god. If they could go beyond the upper limit of this world, then they would become godly beings. Soul beasts couldn't become gods. This seemed to be a set rule, and Gu Yue had once revealed this to him in her story. However, the vast majority of soul beasts refrained from taking this path. After all, even the most powerful human beings only lived for around 200 years. If they were to fail in their quest to become a god, then they would only live a fleeting life of less than 300 years before passing away. The other option for them was to break through their own limits. For most soul beasts, the 100,000-year bottleneck was something that was akin to a heavenly tribulation. After reaching 100,000 years of age, the heavenly tribulation would strike within 100 years, and if they couldn't withstand it, then they would be destroyed both in body and soul. The soul beasts that were confident in their own bodies would all choose to take this path, as a successful breakthrough would mean that they could live for another 100,000 years. Once a soul beast progressed through that bottleneck, their powers would be drastically enhanced, and they would become a great beast. If a 100,000-year-old soul beast were the equivalent of a tidal Douluo, then a great beast would be the equivalent of a hyper Douluo. The more of these bottlenecks a great beast progressed through, the more powerful they become. There were even legends about great beasts that were over 1 million years old. Those beasts would have had to break through 10 of those bottlenecks, and their powers would simply be unfathomable. Only great beasts could adopt human forms even without choosing to be reborn as a human. The woman standing before him was most definitely releasing the aura of a soul beast, yet she was able to adopt such a perfect human form, so she was definitely a great beast. She was most likely at least 200,000 years old, and that made her equivalent to a human Douluo. Even with his suit of one-word battle armor, Tang Wuling would only be comparable in power to a seven-ring soul sage, one without a martial soul true body. At that, no matter how much of a cultivation prodigy he was, there was no way he could contend with this being, even though he could sense that this seemed to be a dragon-type soul beast. The woman was slowly approaching them, and purple light was flowing off to both sides from within her eyes. The closer she came to Tang Wuling, the more pressure he fell under, and the more golden light he released from his body. He knew that this level of pressure was already approaching his tolerance limit, and only the unyielding will emanating from his bloodline still kept him on his feet. A puny human like you dares to come to our Star Dou Forest to hunt for soul beasts? You sure are insolent. As the purple-haired woman spoke, she stopped around 50 meters away from Tang Wuling. Chapter 889. All of a sudden, her pupils contracted slightly, and a hint of confusion appeared on her face as if she'd seen something that was both shocking and perplexing to her. Tang Wuling brandished his golden dragon spear and said in a grim voice, I had no intention of hunting for soul beasts here, and we don't know how we ended up in here. We were already unconscious by the time we arrived in this forest. Not long after we woke up, the Crimson Fire Monkey King attacked us, and that was why we killed it. The purple-haired woman's brows furrowed tightly, and she didn't continue to speak, but the pressure erupting from her body had clearly lessened. Right at this moment, Douluo poked her head out from behind Tang Wuling and appraised the purple-haired woman with a curious look on her face. Their eyes met, and the woman immediately shuddered as an astonished look appeared on her face. She almost instinctively blurted out something, but she caught herself after taking in Douluo's expression. What are your names? The woman asked. Tang Wuling replied, My name is Tang Wuling, and this is my girlfriend, Douluo. We bear no ill will, and I can offer you something of value if you'd let us leave. The woman appraised him with a contemplative look on her face, and her killing intent was clearly fading away, making it appear as if she'd truly been tempted by Tang Wuling's offer. What can you possibly have to offer me? She asked as she mulled over the situation. It was extremely easy for her to kill Tang Wuling, but she had just identified who he was. Even more importantly, she had also caught sight of Douluo standing behind him, so the situation was rather complex. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this. Indeed, what could he possibly offer that could be of interest to a great beast like her? He had many types of uncommon metals and spirit items that were quite precious to him, but they most likely weren't all that noteworthy in the eyes of a great beast that had lived in the Star Dou Forest for hundreds of thousands of years. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to him, and he asked, Are you a dragon? The purple-haired woman raised an eyebrow and replied, That's right, I'm a demonic infernal dragon. In reality, the woman standing before Tang Wuling was a demonic infernal dragon monarch that had been ranked at ninth among the 10 great beasts since as far back as 10,000 years ago. She was ranked alongside the number 1 great beast, gold-eyed black dragon King Ditian, as the 2 great dragon monarchs. Her powers were far inferior to that of beast god Ditian, but she wasn't inferior to him in the slightest when it came to the purity of her bloodline and her aptitude for growth. She was one of the rare purebred true dragons that remained among the current dragon clan, and that was why she'd been able to transcend her heavenly tribulation and become a great beast. Demonic infernal dragon. Tang Wuling drew a sharp breath as he instantly deduced who this woman was. 100,000-year-old soul beasts were extremely rare already, and great beasts were naturally even rarer. This demonic infernal dragon had to be one of the legendary 10 great beasts. With that in mind, he didn't dare to delay any further in fear that she would change her mind. It was very important for him to survive, especially with Douluo here with him. He raised a hand and removed a bracelet on his wrist as he said, I once stumbled upon the tomb of the dragon clan on another continent, and I obtained this necklace from there. Perhaps it'll be useful to you. The bracelet he had removed was none other than the one with the rainbow gemstone that he'd obtained at the dragon tomb. There was an extremely faint rainbow light emanating from the gem, and if one would focus their attention on it, they discovered that it was indeed emanating a dragon-type aura. The demonic infernal dragon monarch raised an eyebrow before sweeping an arm toward Tang Wuling. A burst of gentle suction force appeared, drawing the bracelet directly toward her. The bracelet covered a distance of 50 meters in the blink of an eye before landing in her grasp. However, in the instant that her hand came into contact with it, an unexpected turn of events suddenly unfolded. The ordinary-looking rainbow gem suddenly began to glow brightly, and a burst of scintillating rainbow light erupted into the heavens. The inky black world instantly took on a dazzling rainbow color, and it was as if countless giant dragons were letting loose thunderous roars in unison. Arg! The demonic infernal dragon monarch let loose a howl of agony, and the bracelet immediately slipped out of her hand. Specks of rainbow light gradually began to converge up above, forming a massive rainbow projection. The projection was of the form of a dragon, and it was radiating an aura of peerless authority. Even the powerful demonic infernal dragon monarch was instantly forced to the ground, and she was completely immobilized as she trembled uncontrollably, seemingly contending with some kind of overwhelming pressure. Tang Wuling was completely bemused by this turn of events as he couldn't feel anything on his end. Everything was normal to him, except the pressure that was being exerted on him by the demonic infernal dragon monarch had completely disappeared. He was feeling very comfortable as he basked under the rainbow light, and even Douluo had emerged from behind him to stand by his side. A dazed expression appeared on her face, and she seemed to be in deep thought about something. The rainbow gem expanded in midair, and in the next instant, it returned to Tang Wuling's wrist as a streak of rainbow light. Tang Wuling could sense a burst of respectful intent coming from it, and it seemed to have some kind of special connection to him. Right at this moment, the sharp tip of the teardrop-shaped gem suddenly stabbed downward, piercing through the veins in his wrist. A stream of blood immediately flowed out and fused as one with the rainbow gem. All of a sudden, an enormous burst of will surged into his mind, and he let loose a muffled groan before he completely blacked out. Father! Douluo's alarmed voice was the last thing he heard. In the distance, the demonic infernal dragon monarch trembled for several minutes straight, and the tremors running through her body only gradually subsided as the rainbow light vanished. She sat on the ground and gasped for air as she looked on at Tang Wuling with bewilderment and astonishment in her eyes. At this moment, Tang Wuling had already collapsed to the ground, but his entire body was enshrouded under a layer of rainbow light. What was that? The blessings of the dragon god. She clearly sensed the aura of the dragon god, but that most definitely wasn't the real dragon god. Instead, it was a portion of the dragon god's will. As a purebred true dragon, she revered the dragon god, as did all purebred true dragons. The dragon god was their faith, and after they reached a certain level in their cultivation, they'd be able to borrow the power of the dragon god. However, the will of the dragon god just then seemed to have been borrowed by the power of faith. After all dragons knew that the dragon god no longer existed, but faith in the dragon god hadn't disappeared. However, this faith was at least over 100 times stronger than the faith in the demonic infernal dragon's heart. Only when the dragon clan was in its absolute heyday would it have been possible for such a strong will of the dragon god to descend. How was this possible? How could this type of will appear on a human? Even their lord wasn't capable of this. Despite her astonishment, she couldn't help but cast her gaze toward Douluo. At this moment, Douluo was in a complete panic, desperately calling out for the unconscious Tang Wuling. Father! What the hell? The demonic infernal dragon monarch was completely flabbergasted by what she was seeing. She clambered to her feet and quickly made her way over to Douluo and Tang Wuling, but she didn't dare to get too close due to the rainbow light being released by Tang Wuling's body. My lord. She called out in a gentle voice. Douluo reflexively raised her head, and her eyes were filled with tears. You're a bad person. Why did you hurt my father? I hate you. Wah! The demonic infernal dragon monarch was even more dumbstruck now. She couldn't believe what was unfolding before her eyes. Was this still the same almighty being whom she revered as her lord? No, there had to be something wrong here. With that in mind, she didn't dare to delay any further. She instantly rose up into the air before vanishing into the distance as a streak of purple light. This was no longer something she could take care of on her own. The sky brightened once again, and sunlight shone down onto the earth. The vitality of the forest returned, and normalcy resumed as rich life force energy surged through the air again. Tang Wuling's body was still basked in the rainbow light, and he was in a very complete state of unconsciousness. However, there were no changes taking place in his body. It was as if he'd merely fallen asleep. Not long after that, one figure after another silently approached. There were 4 of them in total, and one of them was none other than the demonic infernal dragon monarch that had just left not long ago. Aside from her, 1 woman and 2 men had also arrived on the scene. The woman was also extremely beautiful, and her long green dress perfectly complemented the rich life force energy emanating from her body. Just the sight of her would evoke within one a sense of intimacy. Among the 2 men, one was a handsome young man giving off a sinister aura, while the other was a middle-aged man who had an extremely heavy disposition. Chapter 890. Among the four of them, the middle-aged man was clearly their leader. He had a head of long black hair with a strip of golden hair that trailed down in front of his cheek, and as soon as he appeared, the surrounding forest naturally fell silent. It wasn't that the creatures here were being intimidated by him. They were simply compelled to fall silent in his presence. My lord, the middle-aged man immediately called out in a respectful voice at the sight of Douluo. Douluo raised her head, and there was a hint of fear in her eyes. Who are you? Don't hurt my father. All four of them were rooted to the spot, and they didn't know whether they should laugh or cry. The handsome young man turned to the middle-aged man and asked, "What's going on here, boss? Our lord." At this moment, Tang Wuling was already in an unconscious state, and Yue clearly wasn't just putting on an act. The middle-aged man made his way over to Yue, and the latter immediately ducked her head in a frightened manner. She then pounced onto Tang Wuling to shield him with her own body. Thus, Yue also entered that rainbow light, and as soon as the middle-aged man's hand came into contact with that light, his entire body shattered violently. He was immediately forced to stumble back several steps as an astonished look appeared on his face. His three companions were also stunned beyond belief. They knew exactly how powerful this middle-aged man was, yet even he was being forced back by the seemingly gentle rainbow light. Just what was this light? It really is the will of the dragon god. The middle-aged man's brows were tightly furrowed as he mused. But why has the will of the dragon god descended upon him? He may have the bloodline of the golden dragon king within his body, but he's still a human, and he definitely isn't a reincarnated soul beast. It's already very strange for him to possess this golden dragon king bloodline. Where did this will of the dragon god come from? The purple-haired woman also had a wry smile on her face. This is the most powerful will of the dragon god I've ever seen. What do we do? Ditian. That's right, the middle-aged man standing before her was none other than the gold-eyed black dragon king, Ditian. This was the man who was widely renowned as the beast god and the leader of the 10 great beasts. Ditian's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned to the young man. Yao Ling, get our lord out of there so I can examine her condition. The young man was clearly taken aback by this request. How can I possibly do something that even you failed at, boss? Ditian explained. This will of the dragon god only has a powerful intimidation effect on dragons like us. You don't possess any dragon bloodline, so you won't be affected. However, as long as we're here, you can't hurt him. Otherwise, the will of the dragon god will force us to protect him. The young man became even more surprised. This will of the dragon god sounds really intriguing. I haven't seen something this interesting in a very long time. Should I take him away from you guys and kill him, boss? After we kill him, our lord could recover the might of the dragon god. A wry smile appeared on Ditian's face. That's something for our lord to decide. Now that he has the will of the dragon god in his body, the decision is going to be even harder to make. Perhaps our lord was the one who arranged for the will of the dragon god to be installed in his body in the first place. The young man quickly made his way over to Ditian before reaching out toward Yue. A layer of faint azure light immediately appeared around her body, and the light was very gentle, but she was completely unable to resist its power as she was drawn away from Tang Wuling. She struggled with all her might, but the azure light remained firm and unyielding. Ditian reached out and pressed a hand onto Yue's forehead. There was gently light shimmering from his fingertips. Yue's eyes instantly became glazed over, yet in response to the energy emanating from Ditian's palm, a layer of faint silver scales also appeared all over her body. Moments later, Ditian withdrew his hand and heaved a sigh of relief. Our lord is fine. She seems to have suffered some kind of spiritual damage from a certain heavy impact, and that has jumbled up her memories. With our lord's immense self-regenerative powers, even without any external assistance, she'll return to normal very soon. In the words of humans, she's suffering from temporary amnesia. His three companions immediately heaved sighs of relief as well. A smile appeared on the demonic infernal dragon monarch's face, and she said, "I see. I almost had a heart attack when our lord called that man father. What should we do now, Ditian?" After a brief moment of contemplation, Ditian replied, "This matter is not something that we can take care of. Only our lord will be able to take care of this. With her powers, there's no way she could have sustained any substantial injuries. After she recovers her memories, everything will cease to be an issue. This human is called Tang Wuling, and we'll have to keep observing him. The fact that the will of the dragon god has appeared in his body should have something to do with our lord. I'm beginning to understand why our lord has refrained from killing him now. She's most likely trying to nurture the will of the dragon god within his body. With this power of faith, there will be a far greater chance for our lord to awaken the dragon god after she integrates the golden dragon king's power. When that time comes, we'll be able to construct a divine realm that belongs to us soul beasts on this Douluo continent, and we won't have to live in constant fear of humans anymore." Frenetic expressions appeared in the eyes of all of the other great beasts present upon hearing this, and all of them unconsciously clenched their fists. The four of them silently departed, and the azure light around Yue's body also faded. Only now did the demonic green bird dare to poke its head out of Yue's silver hair and look on at the four departing figures with fear in its eyes. Tang Wuling was dreaming throughout this entire process. He dreamed of a colossal island with no end in sight. Giant dragons flew in the air overhead, and all of them were of different shapes and sizes with scales of different colors on their bodies. On the ground below, the gargantuan mountain dragon king descended into the ocean to form land. In the air above, the holy giant dragon raised its head and roared to the heavens, a show of power and intimidation. Within the sea, water dragons were constantly repeating the process of flying into the air before diving back into the water, creating massive splashes in the process. Everything was forced to bow in subordination in the face of the true dragons. This was a true paradise for the dragon clan. After an indeterminate period of time had passed, heaven and earth suddenly turned red, and one gargantuan fireball after another fell from the sky, landing in the ocean and onto the earth. A series of giant dragons rose up into the air, using their colossal bodies to stop the descending fireballs. The fireballs exploded, bringing countless disasters to the world. The forests were set alight, the rivers and lakes ran dry, and the land was severely ravaged. The entire world seemed to be constantly disintegrating in the face of these countless fireballs. One giant dragon after another shielded the world from those fireballs with their bodies, protecting this world with all their might. Their bodies fell from the sky, and in the moments prior to their deaths, all of them raised their heads and let loose howls of anguish as if they were calling a name. Rainbow light descended as a massive yet illusionary rainbow dragon appeared in the air. Most of the fireballs were kept at bay by this rainbow dragon, and the doomsday-like disaster was finally just barely averted. However, the dragon clan had been completely crushed. Reproduction was very difficult for the dragon clan, and the loss of so many true dragons was definitely a fatal blow. Countless giant dragon carcasses littered the landscape, and dragon blood flowed like rivers. The other races that were being protected by the dragon clan began to mutate as they immersed themselves in the dragon blood, and they began to develop powers of their own. Were these the first soul beasts? Was this the origin story of soul beasts? In the air above, the giant rainbow dragon projection abruptly flapped its wings, and the entire heavens trembled as a gargantuan rift appeared. Enormous suction force erupted from within the rift, carrying countless dragon carcasses into the air before drawing them into the rift. Most of the dragons in this world had disappeared. There were very few true dragons that remained, and all of them were severely wounded. The rift in the sky slowly sealed, and the rainbow projection also vanished into the rift. The image then transformed into the dragon tomb that Tang Wuling had visited once before. Within the massive tomb were countless dragon carcasses. As time passed, their flesh gradually rotted away until they were reduced to nothing more than skeletons. A peerlessly bleak and melancholy aura permeated through the tomb as countless dragon skeletons were left out in the open as if they were trash in a landfill. The rainbow projection was situated at the direct center of the dragon tomb, and its entire body was shimmering as light slowly surged toward it from the dragon skeletons around it. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.